Thank you, Mark and Janet. Our next speaker comes from Charters Towers in Queensland. Please welcome Josephine Heading.
Hello everybody. I too am not a speaker. I'm just off the land, and things were happening to us as a family on the land and no one seemed to be doing anything about it, and I decided to start reading and find out why it was happening. And one thing I would suggest to everybody to do is to actually start reading. You need to inform yourselves. Don't think that seeing legislation is something that you can't understand. You can understand it. If I can understand it, I only went to grade 10, anybody can understand it, because the people that are writing this stuff aren't from your industry. They're making it up. And you have the knowledge to be able to debate nearly everything that they've put up there as legislation. I've got a bit off the point. This is not how I was going to start. I was going to say thank you very much for inviting me here, Peter Manuel, and the hospitality you and your wife Mary has given to us. As I said, I'm not a speaker. I had a speech written out. It's not going to work for me. So I started reading about the ERMP that was imposed upon our area, and the more I read, the more lies I found. It all came about because the government paid scientists to come up with a problem. And the problem was that the barrier reef was in a worsening condition. Thus, reading it further and further, there really isn't a problem. The lies kept building. And eventually, after meeting and rallies and more reading, and I could see, as I said, when you start to read the legislation, the actual amendment bill was brought in, that this amendment bill, Barrier Reef Amendment Bill 2009, is of such regularity nature, there is no need for consultation. Bang, we got it. A mandatory system where we've been charged $165,000 fine or a 2-year jail term for not filling out some paperwork. This is Australia. I was scared, I've got to say, that someone could come into our family and put these charges upon innocent, hard-working country people for no reason except for filling out a piece of paper. I won't go into depth with it, but after further investigation, the then Environmental Minister, Kate Jones, actually admitted that it was actually a green deal that was made before the last election. I am talking Queensland. When reading all this stuff and finding out who was actually sticking up for us, I thought our government, our industry bodies would have a fair bit to say in it. Unfortunately, and I know this is the first time I've actually bagged out our industry bodies, our grazing one is AgForce, and the cane growers along the coast is the Cane Growers Association, etc. They weren't really batting as hard as what they should have been for us. If they were batting as hard, they should have let us know what was going on. In fact, all our industry bodies, as far as I can work out thus far, have accepted government grants to roll out a lot of this legislation. You can't sleep with 2 women and respect one. And that's exactly what's happening. In one way they are taking your memberships and saying they're for you, but apparently the government pays them more to represent what they're saying. So from looking on, I think the first thing that we should be doing is making our industry bodies stand up and start to be counted. Are they standing for us, or are they standing for the government? If they're standing for us, they need to listen to us and push our views over. If they're not, well, they're with the government, and we don't need to send them our membership fees. I personally am not an AgForce member, but I've been sitting on the fence waiting to see what will happen, but every time it turns around, it's something going on that they're accepting again and just getting paid to roll out government workshops. This is really scary. The thing that really has got me going, and I want to share it with you, is the fact that coal seam gas. I'm a hairdresser by trade, been in the industry for 32 years. I was born in Cloncurry, and my grandmother is 100 years old, and they've been on the land or something to do with the land all their life, so I have a fairly good rural background. And when you have got people drilling through your water supply and pumping chemicals into seams of coal underneath the ground, which then causes explosions, which causes fractures in the ground, that will allow this gas and chemicals to be able to seep anywhere into your water supply, we've got bigger problems than anything else. This is our water supply.
It's treason! They're criminals!
I'm a bit astounded. I'm still thinking about these ladies' stories back here. We shouldn't have to go through this. We own the land, we buy the land, we pay the land, we work the land, and through no fault of ours, people come in and tell us what to do, how to do it, at our cost, and drives us off the land. And the worst thing about it all is that people are committing suicides. They're to a point where they've got nothing and nowhere left to go, that they take their lives and leave their families. This is serious. And they're alone. They're totally alone out in the middle of nowhere. They're seeing the bills pile up, they're seeing the regulations piled upon them, and they're at a loss. And it's through no fault of their own. If they were just left to their own devices without having to pay water taxes, without having to pay clearing taxes and on all the other taxes that they've got to pay. As I said, I'm still thinking how bad that is, but the coal, I'm all over the place. The coal seam gas is more serious than anything else whatsoever. Without water, we have no food. The water grows the food. And I was watching an inquiry with Bill Heffron, and he was interviewing the NICNAS body. And for people that don't know what NICNAS is, it's the actual government body that studies the chemicals that are using. And Bill Heffron asked this body of people, which are 3 women sitting there, America's using 700 chemicals to push down under the ground, and have you been studying any of these chemicals? And these women said, yes, we've studied 4. And he said, oh, 4. And they said, well, actually no, 2. We've been studying 2. And he said, in the fracturing process that's been used for, no sir, we're just studying them as chemicals. And he said to them, this is all on TV, and he said to them, so how long have you been in the business? The NICNAS has been around. 20 years NICNAS has been around. And we've been coal gas mining for 10 years, a decade, apparently. Now the Durham department, you've got your water resource managements, we've got Durham, which is the Department of Environmental Resource Managers. They actually have some clips on YouTube as well to tell you about the myths and the truths about coal seam gas. One of the things they've said is the fact that they've been around for 10 decades. And the other thing that this man was pointing out is the fact that they are regulated. They do regulate the mines. They do get a list of the chemicals, and everything's honky-dory, which is quite the opposite to what the Senate inquiry is finding out thus far. And the scary thing for me is if they've been around for 10 years, coal seam gas mining's been around for 10 years, and they've been giving the government the list, and Durham the list of chemicals, and they haven't done the research on the chemicals. We've really had 10 years of stuff going down into our soil and our water supply that we don't know about. And there was a a banker from Sydney, he rang me after my email list and he said, Josie, you should get hold of a movie called Gasland from America. Joss Fox has put it out. People, everybody should watch that movie. They've had coal seam gas over there for 20 years. They've got brain tumours with their people. They've got the hair falling off their animals. They've got big tankers outside their house where they used to be able to get bore water. Now it's got to go through this filtration system, which still isn't any good. They can ignite their water taps from the methane in the water. And it's just a horror movie. The thing is, you would think it was a movie from a scientific horror movie, but it's real. And then I watched a Four Corners documentary, and it's happening in Australia. Around Chinchilla, Wandoan, and I'm talking Queensland because I did ask Peter and he did say to me that coal seam gas mining is probably coming this way as well. And these coal mines can actually come onto your property and just take it over. There was one couple there, they had a mine company come in and they got compensated a very little amount for a pipeline to go across. And that was actually stage one. They didn't actually show them the next stage. They now have 500 coal wells on their property. So their home's gone, their property has devalued. They're not going to be able to sell it, and they can't really make the living off it because they've got all this stuff fenced around. The other thing is, these mines are supposed to be monitored. They've got little testers, the graziers themselves and the farmers have gone out themselves to test them with these testers, and it blows off the map with these testers. The methane is soaking out through these pipes and leaking through the pipes. And there's other areas too where there's big water ponds around where the gas wells are, and the stuff's bubbling up out of the ground. It's supposed to be coming up through the well, the bore casement. That means something terribly wrong has gone underneath and it's coming up through the ground underneath. You can get a blowtorch, you wouldn't do it there because it would explode, but you can get a blowtorch and go over it and this stuff ignites. I don't know if you're aware, but methane gas is 23% worse for the ozone layer than carbon dioxide. We have this leaking in wells, thousands of wells all across Queensland. And you know what? The government's not doing anything about it because of the money. I don't know what they want to do, whether they want to wipe us out completely, as in we are just going to be a casualty. That's not the... I was talking to a lady at the plane coming up, and she said over in the United Kingdom that they've got the coal seam, they've actually got UCGAS, which is underground coal gasification. And she said this plant all around, the grass is all dead. Now this is over in UK where they've been doing it for a while. And she said at night the ground actually glows. And this gas is the next stage of gas that's going to come after coal seam. Coal seam gas, and this is just in my little mind, and I've just done some so that we can relay it easily. Coal seam gas is where they put the drill rod down and collect the gas. And methane gas is in just your normal coal mines. That's what causes the accidents and the explosions underground with your underground mining for just your raw coal. There's always methane gas there. Now they're drilling down to get the methane gas out, and then they also have fracturing where they put the water down with the chemicals to blow all the coal to allow the gas to be able to seep back through and be pumped out. And I just heard Joanne saying about the salt. There's 30 million tonnes of salt that they asked the mining people what are they going to do, and they said, oh, science will work that out in 20 years. To do this also, they're pumping 300,000 megalitres of water to do this gas mining. Now this is coming from the Artesian Basin, which we all know, I come from that area, and in the drought the basin drops and everyone's bores drops down and water can get quite salty and we all have problems. These mining companies pumping out 300,000 megalitres a year for the next 30 years. What sort of impact is that going to have in our water supply, which is thus the water supply for our cattle and townships in these regional areas? There's some documentary about a family, and there's not just this family, I'm just using this one because I know I can give you facts, but if anyone puts me on the spot, there's a family there that they had measured their water. It's dropped 2/3 since the mining has started in their neighbour's place. He said he's got about 3 years left of water supply. The other thing is, people, they're covering it up. They're paying, the mining companies are paying people compensation with a confidentiality clause that you're not allowed to say anything. I've had drillers' wives, coal seamer drillers' wives tell me, Josie, keep going, keep speaking, keep getting the message out there, because we have children and what you're saying is dead right. I've talked to politicians, I've talked to miners, I've talked to drillers, and I'll say to them, tell me that everything's safe and that we've got nothing to worry about. They hang their heads, because they can't look you in the eye and tell you that your water is safe. This is serious. We lose our water, that's the end. And I can't quite understand and quite fathom how they're going to fix this once it's destroyed. As Joanne said, it's taken billions of years to create that water supply, and it's just through negligence and the greed that we're going to destroy it. And they're of such shallow mentality, they think that science will fix it somewhere along in the future. There comes to a point of time where some things just can't be fixed. The other thing that I've been finding very scary is this underground coal gasification. This is actually the next stage after coal seam gas. You have your coal seam, and what they're doing now, mining and normal coal mining and open cut mining is going to be something of the past. The new age mining is going to come after the coal gas mining, coal seam mining. They're going to start putting drills down, two wells goes down, one goes into the coal seam gas and one goes into the ground, and they're actually going to pump contaminated water. It's called injection. They're going to pump your contaminated water, and when I looked it up, that's sewage water and other contaminated water, into these wells and along, and it sort of provides a steam bed, and then they're going to set fire to the coal seam underneath the ground. And this then coal will either, depending on its age and its type, etc., will either turn into gas, which will be pumped up, or it will melt the coal and be pumped out as liquid oils kind of thing. What gets me is the stuff they're pumping back under the ground. And with the coal seam gas, remember the one prior, they have holding ponds, which are paddocks, and I have been told even a whole property has been carved out to pump the contaminated water that they use and the salty water that they use into these ponds. You might have seen pictures of them. They're supposed to be lined and nothing's ever going to happen to it, and it's all well and protected, so DERM says, etc. The lines, the sheeting is torn, so this stuff can seep into the ground. But I haven't had anyone actually confirm it, but my presumption is they're going to put that contaminator back under the ground to get the last of this coal seam out of under the ground. Yes, it all sounds technical, yes, it all sounds very scientific, and yes, one would like to think that people are in control and know what they're doing. But with the record that's been going on, I don't think anybody has got any idea of what they're doing. We have got people just making decisions on our part without actually doing the work. Hence, for 10 years they've been doing coal seam mining, and only now are they doing an inquiry on the chemicals that they're using. That's disgusting. People are not doing their jobs. That NICNAS has been in operation for 20 years. We're supposed to trust these people that are in power of government, thinking that, yes, someone's got a handle on it. They haven't. They're standing there telling you blatant lies, as you've heard from all this other stuff that's been going on with the previous speakers. They're standing there telling you blatant lies just to get through what they want to get through. There's a minister called Craig Wallace. He's the environmental... No, he's not the environmental minister. He's the main roads and Fishery and Marines Minister in Queensland. I don't know if you've heard, but Gladstone Harbour is the main port for shipping out the coal seam gas and coal. And what they're doing is they're dredging the harbour to make the harbour deeper so that the bigger ships can get in. All the fish are dying there at the moment. They've got a disease, what they're calling red spot. Of course, they tried to blame the grazies and the farmers for the runoff and the contaminants from what they're using on the land, but so happens that the dam also run off from the farmers, and it's fine, the fish are fine, so it wasn't the farmers' fault. So they go back, and it's not the dredging, of course it's not the dredging that's going on, and they're trying to find a cause for it. Anyway, the fish have got big swollen eyes, and they're blind, and their flesh is just coming off their bones while they're still alive. It's absolutely quite horrible. So Mr. Craig Wallace has shut the whole thing down for 6 weeks, and of course then you have the domino effect where the fishing businesses are feeling it, the tourism trade's feeling it. So he's really got to start this open again, and he announced that he went out and he caught 160 fish, and those 160 fish were disease-free in broad daylight with a microphone on the news. And in the same interview, they interviewed the fisherman that took him out, and he said, no, that didn't happen. We caught actually 39 fish over a couple of days, and 30 of those fish had the disease. Now, if someone can stand there in broad daylight and tell a blatant lie with photographic facts and not be held accountable, where does this stop? Where does the lying stop, and where do we start holding people in positions of seriousness, making decisions for our lives and our future? Where does that stop? Like, why should I come all the way from Charters Towers to stand in front of a crowd, be as nervous as hell, put myself through it, just so everyone can hear that there's problems interstate? We shouldn't be doing this. We have people who are paid to do this for us. That is their job. They are not doing their job. We are doing our job. We're working daylight till dark. We're paying our taxes. We're collecting the GST, and we're fronting up, and we've got a family, and we're doing our job. And here I am, coming all the way from Charters Towers to check up on people who are getting a better paid job than I am, and making sure they're doing their job. And you know what? They're not doing it. They're not doing their job, and they're getting away with it. They're telling you blatant lies to your face. They shuffle some papers, and now, you know what? They've got the media on their side too. We don't even get a voice, because the media has gone off, and they're going to report about the rednecks that met here. And that's just not true. We're just normal, everyday, hard-working family people. And you know what? We own our land. We own the topsoil of the land. We look after that land. We buy it. We caretake it. We're paying for it. And we're not getting recognised for that. They're stealing it from us. They being the government. And I don't care what political party you stand for, whether you're Liberal National, whether you're Labor, whether you're Bob Katter's party, they've got to start listening to the people. They've got to listen to the people. If it's not working, we can't make a living, and we're not going to exist, and there's not going to be jobs, and there's not going to be food, and there's not going to be water. You can't learn anything sitting up in your Eiffel Tower. And if we've got to let them, we're trying to get them to hear, but they're not listening. So what do we do? What do we do? We're going to walk away from here. I'm going to fly back to Charters Towers. Daryl Marshall's going to fly back. We're all going to go back to our community and go, oh yes, we had a bit of a whinge and we all got together and we had like-minded. We've got to start making these meetings make some progress.
Listen to China. China stopped coal gas seam mining 20 years ago. China did.
We're really, this is, we've told stories. I'm blubbering over here, not making much sense, We've got all these people standing up here, and we're just going to walk away from here again, and there's not going to be anything to move forward. What are we going to do? We've got to come up with some. So we have to come up with some ideas of how we're going to work, or it's not going to. There is going to be no us. It's as simple as that. This is like a cancer.
Absolutely right.
This is like a cancer. It's starting to infect us. It's a disease. It's terminal. First of all, there's denial. Oh no, this is not going to happen. The government wouldn't let it do. No, it's not going to happen. Then there's anger. That's the stage I'm in at the moment. And then the next stage is submission and acceptance and death. I don't want to die. I've worked too damn hard on the land for a future for my kids. I don't want my water contaminated. I want to make sure that if they are going to mine, that it's going to be safe. There was a stampede and a blockade at Liverpool where they're just going, I think it's Santos Mining is just going to go ahead. They're not even waiting for the reports to see about the inquiry. They're just going to go ahead and do it. No one's stopping them. They're doing it. Did we see it on TV? No. We're not going to see any of this. The convoy of no confidence, going through those towns on that convoy, everybody is saying the same thing. The grassroots people are saying the same thing. Enough is enough. We can't take it anymore. So it really is up to us and what we're going to do about it and where we're going to go from here. But people like Peter Manuel, myself, other people that have got themselves here are going to run out of energy, we're going to run out of funding, because we're up against World Wildlife Fund, we're up against the RSPCA, we're up against the animal liberationists. They're big money. They're worldwide. You do not have a title world and not be worldwide. We're talking big bucks. And we are all single little farms all across the way that are being picked off slowly and surely, one by one, until eventually you're going to look behind, your neighbour's not going to be there. This is Australia. We're supposed to be a free country, and we're supposed to be of the good life. Nothing's good. I can't go to bed at night and think, oh well, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to clean the windows, and because all the time out on our property at Ophir, they're going to start drilling for coal gas. They're going to drill through that precious water supply. We have got drillers saying, Josie, those caps on those bores, they're not going to last 20 years because they're incompetent. The drillers that are doing it are incompetent. You know, I believe them. Do something about it. Give me some paperwork. Let's do something. We can't because of the confidentiality clause. Anyway, thank you for having me, but we've got to walk away from here, or even before we walk away from here, make some resolution that what are we going to do next? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Our next speaker comes from South Australia in the southeast, Leon Ashby, who's the recipient of many Land Care Awards. Leon Ashby.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming. I'm going to get stuck into it. I've got 3 ideas. Josie just talked about what are we going to do. I'm going to put them to you at the end. But my message is you only have the rights others allow you to have. That means we have to continually fight to maintain our rights. I've been a farmer for 30 years in South Australia and in Queensland. I've been in dairy, beef, wool, fat lambs, ostriches, goats, been a roo shooter, been a shearer, irrigator, and in recent times a political stirrer. I'm a runner-up in the 1999 Queensland Land Care Research Awards and a Centenary Medal recipient for services for conservation and the environment. I spent 5 years working towards getting a rural community TV channel, only to be stopped at the last hurdle. So I've been having a go at trying to get these stories out and trying to get some action. I'm a co-founder of the No Carbon Tax Climate Skeptics political party. We're a political party, an action group and a lobby group. If you don't know what sort of things we do, we organise the Lord Monckton Australian Tour and we run candidates in the Senate, and I was one of those. We're now working on a court case which will challenge the Australian Bureau of Meteorology about its temperature records. The BOM records show no warming since 1880. They adjusted their records to show a 1 degree warming since 1880, and if successful, the case will show most of the adjustments are not justified, which will show there is no basis for a carbon tax, and it will unravel the carbon tax and renewable energy bills. So we've got lawyers looking at that at the moment, and it should be about to announce that in the next couple of weeks. I have 3 stories to tell you: my own, the general story of property rights in Australia, and the tragic story of suicides. Thousands of farming families have worked for years to own their own properties, only to have environmental laws introduced to steal it from them, as in Kate's case, or have most of their rights removed to run it. Sometimes it's the whole property. In my case, it was part of my Queensland property. I come from an innovative farming and fishing family. My great-great-great-great-grandfather grew the first wheat in South Australia on what is now Henley Beach Road. In 1970, my father's dairy farm in Mount Gambier produced 200,000 litres of milk. The same acres in 2004, I produced 6 times that amount, 1,200,000 litres. So I said litres of milk, should have been litres if I didn't say that. We made the soil more fertile, we grazed the grasses better, balanced the diets of the cows better, irrigated the pastures and more. Like many farmers, I love working the land, and I love helping it produce lots of food and fibre. Some people think we farmers cannot feed a planet of 7 billion people. Well, that's rubbish. To demonstrate this, Australia produces half its farm production on just 1% of our land mass. That's right, almost 50% of our production comes from the irrigated 1% of our country. And on top of that, 6 times the amount of water that flows down the Murray-Darling goes out to sea in northern Queensland each year. That's right, there's heaps more water for us for further irrigation development if we want to. Up to recently, we've produced enough food for 70 million people. We're exporting 70% of what we produced. We could triple that effort easily. That's without better recycling, desalination and water recovery from other sources. We have amazing potential, but we've been brainwashed and over-regulated against our best interests. The green religion says we cannot produce more food because we'll hurt the planet. Well, that's garbage. I know from experience we can improve the planet as well as feed everybody. The green religion is a bunch of lies. With the right price incentives, secure property rights and freedom to use the rainwater and the land we have in Australia, we could be much more productive and prosperous. But back to my story. On my Queensland property in 1999, I developed a way to run water out of small creeks across thousands of acres of scrub country. I was pushing scrub timber into rows and bulldozing dirt along the contour bank through the scrub. In one spot I moved water 5 kilometres one way and then 5 kilometres back the opposite direction, only dropping 30 centimetres elevation the whole distance. In effect, I made that land that normally had 30% of its rainfall soaked into the soil become land that had 150% of the rainfall of that area infiltrate the soil. In other words, I developed it from an effective 5-inch rainfall to 25-inch rainfall land. If you Google my name on YouTube, you can see 3 videos on the subject. On the country I did this, the carrying capacity of the land increased an average 4-fold. Native grasses, not seen for many years, returned and eroded gullies began healing. It was a win for the environment and productivity. But only months after being a Landcare Award finalist for this work, the Queensland Labor Beattie government and the Howard Federal Liberal government decided to stop vegetation clearing in Queensland to allow Australia to meet its Kyoto target. Overnight, the resource management legislation came in and everything I was doing to reduce erosion and to spread water was impacted. And every land management tool I was using became illegal in some way. A third of my property was deemed of concern or endangered. No actual species were endangered, just a combination of soil and native vegetation was deemed endangered. There are over 1,000 of these combinations of soil and vegetation in Queensland, so it's just another way of locking up the land to make it a national park without the government paying for it. So on a third of my property I couldn't put up new fences, I couldn't use fire to regenerate the grasses, I couldn't push over trees, I couldn't make contours through the scrub, and I couldn't even drive over a small bush on my motorbike while mustering because if it was destroyed I could be fined $125,000. The rights I previously had were stolen without consultation. On top of this, I still had to maintain the land and pay rates on it without being able to develop it. There were stocking rate limits and new dams needed licences. Very similar to what's now attempting to happen here in South Australia. You might ask if we suspected this was going to occur, and yes we did. Because we were concerned, the local Department of Natural Resources boss came to our Landcare meeting and assured us it wasn't going to happen ever. Then a month after his reassurance, it came in. Okay, he was lied to by his minister, but he was used to stop us getting more aggressive. The same can be said of the AgForce group, which is a lobby group, farmers lobby group, and it was used, basically manipulated into agreeing with the government to bring legislation in. AgForce leaders were like bureaucrats with no conviction about rights or truth. They would just say to us, look, you can't beat the Greens or the greenie myths or the fads or the things that are coming in, so just cut the best deal you can. Negotiate a few rights away each time and hope that the Greens don't come back for another bite. Well, if you do that, as a few speakers have said, eventually you'll have nothing left. I helped mobilise 2 property rights marches in Queensland, one in Winton and one in Roma, and it slowed the progress of the Greens for a couple of years. I then returned to South Australia to farm. I bought land beside Lake George in the southeast and it became involved in a property rights issue there. I had rights right up to the edge of Lake George. Instead of the South Australian government negotiating to buy what they wanted, they forced me to give them the land. And did this by not allowing me to sell the property without 50 acres on the edge of the lake being given away. I could have gone to court to fight it, but it just wasn't worth it. I've now stopped being a farmer and I've started a political party to try and reverse these injustices. In the Northern Territory, Henbury Station has been bought with 2/3 government money to get rid of its thousands of cattle so it can receive carbon credits. It's a new green industry swapping food production for paper money. It will be a lemon and of course we'll all lose. In New South Wales, I have friends who have to plough their land every few years, to be able to maintain their crop acreage that they have, because if cropland is not ploughed every 7 years, I think it is, they lose that right. Another New South Wales friend of a friend has a spring on the land. They now are being charged for the water from it. It's gone from water being theirs to the water being the government's. Now that's theft. If they think they'll not lose more rights, they're naive. All of us will lose our land, water, vegetation and stock management rights if nothing changes. The Green Movement is not about improving the land, it's about controlling resources. My Queensland Landcare group tried to educate Greens. We even got a leading Green activist to come out to see some Landcare work. We soon realised she wasn't genuine about the environment because she refused to get out of the car to even look at how we the problem. Wait until you have an international, unelected, green-coloured communistic government have its way with you. I trust you see how we have to keep all our property rights to maintain a fair and free society. Ladies and gentlemen, can you tell me this? Do you want to lose more property rights?
No.
No, I don't want to either. Are you prepared to join others and fight to keep your rights?
Yes.
To the right. Okay, my last subject is about the emotional toll of fighting this oppression, and we've got to get some action here too. In the last 12 years, I estimate over 500 farming families Australia-wide, have lost someone to suicide from the pressure of different environmental laws. If I get elected to the Senate, I'll fight for an inquiry into the suicides related to these the unjust environmental laws, so we can establish for sure how many lives we have lost and have it on public record that it actually happened. Remember, Australia lost less than 500 soldiers in action in Vietnam, and we lost 173 people, unfortunately, in Black Saturday in Victoria. And the amount of unnecessary suicides due to injustices from environmental laws, I believe, is 3 times the size of the Black Saturday bushfires, and it's unrecognised. Being a bit of a student of history, I found a similar example of a nation ignoring injustices, oppression and the loss of innocent lives, and that was the nation of Israel back in 580 BC. It was given a warning by a prophet, and if they didn't get their act together, that their country would fall apart, and I believe that that lesson's for us as well. Our governments take our lands incrementally. Except for an occasional exception, they never give us just terms. Only very occasionally is someone very fortunate to get that. But when we lose it, we know that's theft. That's dishonest gain to the state. The oppression and extortion from our green groups, politicians and bureaucrats has caused disillusionment, depression, bankruptcies, family split-ups and many deaths. I've lost 2 friends to suicide and one of them, good friend, he had 24,000 acre property. I'll just shorten this pretty quickly, and he fought for 3 years to get his rights to do the development. They frustrated him at every turn, and eventually he pulled the trigger on himself. So, just to get to the very end very quickly, I've got 3 suggestions that we can do to reverse the loss of rights. We can keep in communication with each other, and I've got contacts around Australia, others have too, and there are people who've stopped NRM and other government agencies from entering properties and finding ways to defer any court proceedings. To do this, if you want to keep in contact, there's John Michelmore's got some forms on a clipboard, and if you could put your name and contact details on that, we'll link you up with other people around Australia, and we'll start getting some action and working out what to do in the future. But there are some people really thinking about it, and we've got some good ideas. The second is that we can, you could probably help with a few dollars for this Bureau of Meteorology court case to unravel the carbon tax, and we need about $100,000 to do that. And we know a lot of people, so we'll be hopefully getting that underway pretty soon. So you can help with that, and if you put your name on the clipboard, we'll explain to you how you can get involved with that as well. But thirdly, we must vote for those who that we know will stand up for our rights, especially those prepared to take on the green religion at state and federal level, and that they will lead us to a more prosperous future based around Australian industries. Let's end the green religious control of our nation and get knowledgeable and upright independent thinkers in Parliament who have vision and will lead on the matter. Vote for people who will speak against the watermelon religion and expose how it subtly works to undermine the public interest. Vote for people who understand property rights and stand beside those people standing up for their rights. Vote for people who are capable of educating the public, not just be on the payroll when they get into Parliament. I believe it's time we draw a line in the sand and say no more to losing our freedoms. No more government-funded fraudulent science reports, no more bending to overzealous green laws that do nothing for the environment, and no more destroying Australian industries. You only have the rights others allow you to have. Please do your bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Our final speaker today is Daryl Pedersen from the Road Freighters Association.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Peter Manuel for inviting me here to speak today. I also like to thank Brian Laverell for his accommodation. I came from far north Queensland. I'm the President of the National Road Freighters Association. I'd like to come here from the transport point of view, or road freight point of view. We're a service industry to all other Australian industries. If all the other industries, our farmers and producers, fail, then we fail. We need our customers, which are farmers, which are producers, manufacturers, and we are losing them at a very fast rate in this country. We have our own set of circumstances with road freight industries, with the fatigue laws, the registrations that have been quadrupled under the Labor governments that we have at the present time. And it's making it harder for small independent businesses to keep operating against the multinationals. And I believe we're seeing the same thing happening. Our food bowl is being destroyed and we're allowing imported food into the country, which I think needs to be stopped. We are now in a situation where we can import stuff cheaper than what we can do it here through over-regulation caused by too much bureaucracy in this country. The NRFA was actually formed as a grassroots organisation in 2007, 2008 to represent people on the ground in the road freight industry, because our so-called peak industry groups have sold us out. And from what I've heard here today, the same thing is happening in the primary producers farming industry. Your peak industry groups are selling you out. Each and every one of my board members are involved in the road freight industry at grassroots level. They are all either truck drivers, owners, operators, or some are wages operators, and some of them are pilot, vehicle drivers, etc. But they are all involved in the industry at grassroots level. And I believe that we need to keep working together as a coalition of industries. The NRFA sponsored the Coalition of Industries rally to Canberra. I was very proud to lead convoy number 2 from far north Queensland. And for the first time in my life, I've seen all industries work together. And we need to do that to keep pressure on the governments and tell them that we are not going to let our country go down the creek. Because the way it's going at the moment, we are being sold out. We are being sold out by bureaucracy. We are so over bureaucratic nightmare to get anything done. When you write a letter to a minister, you don't get a reply from the minister, you get a reply from his advisor who tells you to go to another advisor and so on. It's just beyond a joke. And I would say, from my perspective and listening to the stories here today, with the coal seam gas, with what's happened to Janet and Matt over in WA, Kate from New South Wales and now Queensland, this is happening all the time. And from where I stand as a transport operator which services primary producers, most of my personal business is primary production supply. So when our farmers hurt, my business hurts. And many of our members the same. We touched on the live export bans, absolutely decimated the graziers in the northern end of this country. And from my association's point of view, decimated a lot of our livestock carriers. But what people don't stop to think, it also decimated general carriers, stock and station agents, grocery shops, because they all had a lesser amount to ship into that area because there's no wealth in that area. If a farmer can't afford to build new fences, then he doesn't need that equipment bought in. If he can't afford a new tractor, he doesn't need that equipment bought in. If he can't sell his produce, he doesn't need it shipped away. Therefore, we as transport operators don't have a job. So, very much so, the transport industry relies on all other industries for its wealth. And all other industries rely on us for their wealth, to deliver their wealth to their customer. We need to work together, and I would urge each and every one of you here today at grassroots level to keep lobbying the governments and to keep working together as a coalition of industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. You will notice that there's someone who's not here today, Paul Kiker, Minister for the Environment. I should let you know that Flag SA sent him an invitation, but he didn't even have the courtesy to respond. And yet on television on Friday night on State Line, when he was interviewed about this rally, he said he'd been trying to convene a meeting between farmers and himself and he couldn't achieve it. Well, I can assure you he certainly didn't try too hard, because my office is in communication with that office at least once every fortnight, and we've spoken to their officers in the last month on a couple of occasions and not a word was mentioned. So much for trying to communicate with farmers. To wrap up proceedings today, I'll ask Peter Manuel to come to the stage.
Thanks very much, John. I'm getting sick and tired of the word moving forward because we're going backwards. I was going to make a bit of a speech here, but it's gone on long enough. But I'd just like to thank the Victor Harbour Harness Racing Club again thanks for this fantastic venue. Look, they've got a race meeting coming up on the 26th of December, Boxing Day. I'll certainly come along and support them, and I hope everybody else does too. I just want to say a couple of little things. Thanks to the interstate speakers, they were absolutely fantastic, and the politicians, and again for John Daly and his staff, Jenny Lowe and Connie Benares, they've been absolutely fantastic. But just one little thing too, it just annoys the hell out of me when we're being cut back on our water allocation, and these dirty rotters have sold $30 billion of our water rights to overseas investors. Who in the hell's got it? Secondly, when you get these natural resource management officers going onto a property and saying to the farmer, I want to have a look at your 3 dams. And he says, I've only got 2. And they said, no, we've got an aerial photo, and they produce it. And he said, well, I'll show you the 2 round ones, the square one's a horse menage. I'd just like to see a bit of common balance. Just come into this. And Mr. Kiker, I'd like to say a fair bit about you.
He's a bastard!
But what I will say is that I'll meet you anytime, anywhere, on radio, in a country shed house or in Parliament House, because I think we need to have a chat. But thank you all again for coming, and I really do appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I promise you a minute and a half, and that's all. My name's Karen Edwards. I'm the chair of the FLAG SA, Food Producers Landowners Action Group. It just shows how a small group like ours, a handful of people, can make a difference. We have only been going for 12 months, and just 12 months. And we've had one big rally, as most of you know, at Strathalbyn, brought 1,000 people. We didn't have to spend money on advertising. It's just through word of mouth and people's passion for the cause. And your attendance here today, you will make a difference by spreading the word and hearing these stories. These things are happening under our noses in South Australia, not quite as bad as our poor people in Queensland. So our hats off to them, and keep up your passion. You know, I had to give a cynical laugh when the poor lady was talking about the methane gas. Did I hear the Animal Liberation saying something about our cows are producing too much methane? You know, our cows are producing too much methane, and what are they doing up in Queensland? Where are the environmentalists there? I promised I'd only talk for a minute. What's happening here in the Mount Lofty Ranges, which is really going to hit us all with dams, is Martin Stokes from Natural Resource Management Board said by next December all low flow bypasses must go on our dams. Now these can cost us up to $25,000 per dam. I tell you what, they will know, the Natural Resource Management and their Animal Liberations and so on will know what it's all about when they go swanning around these farmers' markets, buying our fresh fruit and so on, thinking how lovely it is to have all this fresh food. Well, how many strawberries do you have to grow? How many cabbages and lettuces do you grow to pay for that $25,000 dam low flow bypass? They're not going to be there. Those fresh foods won't be in the farmers' markets because they just can't afford to stay on their land. People power is the answer in this thing. You know, and you are the people power. We are the small amount of people power, and we hope you've generated something by just speaking to you and hearing these stories. It's horrific, and we don't hardly believe it's Australia that we're talking about. Now, Peter's already thanked many people. I particularly want to thank John Daly and his staff of 2. He doesn't have lots of people floating around the offices like a lot of the other politicians, but by golly, they have been a wonderful support to us. You know, it's not often that you see such a crossbench of politicians all on one platform, where we've got Family First, we've got the Liberal Party, the climate skeptics and so on, all fighting for us. So thank you to those people. But I particularly, as chairperson, want to thank our committee. Peter, as you know, is our chairperson, our spokesperson, and you know why, because he's got such a a wonderful, genuine way of letting you know what we're actually battling for. And not only Peter, but his family. His family have lived this. In fact, I don't know if Peter minds us mentioning this, that he actually had a death threat before Christmas. Now, can you imagine having a death threat because you're fighting to stay on your land? And that's a disgrace. Fortunately, as you can see, it didn't evolve, but why does it have to come to that? So, hats off. No, of course, he didn't give his number. Now, this was a verbal telephone and, of course, no number there. So that family have had to live through that, and just think about it. Looking at the horizon, perhaps, I don't know how they lived through it, but looking at the horizon, who's that person, whose is that car? So thank you to Peter and his family, also Carl, our secretary, and we have people on the committee who are not even on the land, who have supported us and some have done thousands of kilometres to support this cause. We've had 22 submissions, part submissions put in through John Darley to the through the Parliament, and which is, you know, Paul Kiker. You probably heard how irate he was and how he insulted the wonderful Anne Brassington, who supported us. So my thank you firstly to our committee and to all the people, as Peter said, the Trotting Club and the food stalls over there who's kept things going. So lock your gates, buy one of our red signs there, put it on your gate and lock the gate, because that's what's happening interstate. They've got an organisation called Lock the Gate, and they've actually got the mining companies starting to take their equipment off the land. So stand up. Thank you for staying so long.